Hi, welcome to the IC Realtime video series. I'm Patrick Carter, Training Manager for IC Realtime. Today we're going to talk about the menu structure, negotiating around the menu, and also some of the key features that you're going to want to do when you're setting up your recorder for the first time. We're also going to talk a little bit about the encode settings and also some of the network settings, but we'll cover a lot of networking in another class. So let's start with how to log into the recorder itself. I'm sitting in front of an NVR, but the situation is very similar. The functionality is very similar on a Flex DVR or any analog unit. Simply right-click on the screen. I'm going to go down to the main menu. It's going to give me a login. It's going to give me a login. The default usernames are user, guest, and admin. We'll talk more about the accounts later on, but for right now, let's go ahead and log in as the admin. To type in the password is very simple. You'll notice the keyboard over here on the right-hand side. I click on the keyboard, I can toggle between letters, numbers, uppercase, and lowercase. In this case, we are going to use lowercase numbers or lowercase letters, and I'm going to type in the word admin, A-D-M-I-N, and enter. Now this is the default admin password. I strongly recommend that later on, once you're done configuring your unit, you do change the password. Admin is a pretty common password. We run into it a lot. You may have seen news lately about many hackers who are logging into recorders remotely using just admin. So again, we strongly recommend you change that password, and we'll talk about that later. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is the info screen. The info screen will give us basic information about the unit itself. For example, the hard drive info will tell me exactly how much hard drive space I have available, how much space I have overall for the unit. This particular unit has a 2 terabyte hard drive in it, and it has none free. Well, that's because it's already been recording for a while, so there's no free space on the drive. This just lets you know that the unit has filled up the drive and it's already starting to override itself. If you have multiple drives in the unit, they're all going to be listed here separately, and a lot of times you're going to see them in a state of hibernation. That's perfectly normal. A hibernating drive just basically means that it's not working presently. It's just standing by waiting for its turn. So normal drive is certainly normal. Any other drives that are here that aren't being written to will be listed as hibernating. Our bits per second actually explains exactly how much throughput each camera is using. This is kind of handy in an analog system to help you troubleshoot possible problems with a wire, as well as in an IP system to show you exactly how much space you're utilizing on the network. The log is a very helpful tool. It shows you not only who's logging in and out, but what they're doing when they're in. We strongly recommend that you create separate user accounts for each one of your users. If everyone's logging in as admin, all you know is that admin did something. If Bob logs in, you know exactly what Bob did. Another very cool feature of this is when someone logs in, it'll actually give you the IP address that they logged in from. So if they logged in somewhere on the local network, you'll know exactly what computer they were using when they logged in. If they logged in from home, you'll know that as well. The version is very important to us in the technical department. You'll see the build date here, which in this particular case is from 2013. Does that mean it's an old unit? Not necessarily. The build date is the actual firmware date of the recorder. We have a great philosophy here at IC Realtime. If it ain't broke, we're not going to fix it. A lot of other manufacturers release firmware every week. Why? If there's nothing broken, there's no need to go through the hassle of updating your firmware. So to have a firmware that's from 2013, isn't that unusual? There certainly are newer firmwares available, and if you need to update your firmware, you can certainly contact our technical support group and they'll gladly do that. A lot of times when you contact our support group, the very first thing they're going to ask you is what the build date is on that unit. So just go here under build date and it'll tell you. Keep in mind that a lot of times your end users don't understand that, and they're going to think the unit was actually assembled back in 2013. That's certainly not the case. Remember, all of our units are built to suit. When you place your order, they're assembled that day. And we're going to load the latest firmware on it, even if it's from 2013. Online Users is a pretty valuable tool. You can see exactly who's logged in at any given time. Think about a school, for example, where maybe each parent has the ability to log in and see their child's classroom. You can go in here and see who's been logged in idly for several hours and disconnect them if you like. You can also block users. If you find that someone may be viewing your cameras who shouldn't be in there, you can block their IP address so they can't log in anymore. The remote device information tells you about the IP addresses that are assigned to the cameras on an IP system. Most of our units now come with multiple network cards, so you can actually see exactly what devices are connected to each network. The network information is a very valuable tool, primarily in IP systems. It gives you the ability to ping, which is a very helpful network tool, without you having to run out to your truck and grab your laptop. Maybe you're troubleshooting a network connection, you can actually ping the device or ping the internet and make sure that your network connectivity is fine. Another very neat tool on our new NVRs is a packet sniffer. I can take a handy USB drive, plug it into my device, put in an IP address on the network, do a sniff. It'll actually look for all the network traffic going through that IP. It will save it onto my USB, and then I can use a tool like Wireshark, for example, to analyze that data and find out exactly where my bottlenecks are. Another very helpful tool is the network load. It will actually tell me exactly what cameras are utilizing how much bandwidth. That way I can help troubleshoot exactly what's going on my network. Under the general settings, you'll find time and date. Time and date can be synchronized off your PC if you're using the web interface. I can certainly modify this as I like. I can certainly modify daylight savings time as well. The daylight savings time feature is based on the day of the week. For example, the second Sunday in March at 2 a.m., it'll automatically advance the daylight savings time. It'll revert back on the first Sunday in November. Keep an eye on the government because they tend to change that now and then. But having this setting here and having it enabled will automatically adjust my recorder to daylight savings time. Pretty cool. I can certainly change my date and time format if I'd rather use the European style, or if I'd rather use a 24-hour clock, I can do that here as well. Probably the most important tool in the general settings is this tool right here, hard drive full. When it's set to overwrite, it will actually get to the end of the drive and start back over and continue on. If you have a second drive, it'll move on to drive 2, continue, and then roll back to 1. There is a feature here that's called stop. What it will happen is when that hard drive fills up, it will stop recording on that drive and allow you to move on to the second drive and continue on, but it won't write to that drive again until you pull it out and put another one in. A lot of banks, for example, or retail applications will require you to archive hard drives, and this is a very helpful tool. Keep in mind this can also be used for evil purposes. If you've got a disgruntled employee who has access to the general tab, he could certainly stop recording on your drive, wait a couple weeks and then do something bad, and you won't have any recording of it. So be very cautious of who you give general access to. Normally, once you've given the permissions to change time and date, you don't normally need to go back in there again. The video standard, although it looks like it can be quickly changed from here, is actually not. It's done through the firmware. If you're changing the unit from NTSC to PAL, for example, if you're moving it out of the country, that's normally done through a firmware. But you also want to verify this. We've run into scenarios in the past where units have been purchased in the US and shipped outside the country to other places that may use a PAL video standard. Please let us know when that's going to happen, and we will make sure that the appropriate firmware is loaded on there for the video standard where you're at. Pack duration is a very neat function. If you're doing real recording 24/7, pack duration is actually the amount of time that each file is going to be. So for example, a pack duration of 60 minutes starts at midnight, the next file is created at 1 a.m., the next one at 2 a.m. throughout the day. For most people, that's just fine. However, occasionally you'll get an end user who wants to do a lot more playback. They may want a shorter pack duration, maybe 15 minutes. So every 15 minutes, each camera will create a new file. This is very helpful in fast food applications, for example, where they want to see an incident and they only want us to download a really small clip. Other times, folks will use the cameras for other functions and they may not need a pack duration that small. You can extend it out to a 2-hour pack duration by setting it to 120 minutes. The auto logout is a very important function, especially if you're doing integration. The auto logout means after a certain period of time, the unit will log you out. It's very helpful if you have multiple users with multiple permissions. Maybe a manager will log in and walk away from the unit. After 5 minutes or so, it'll log him out, and then anyone who logs in may not be able to see what he can see. Setting the timeout, the auto logout to 0 will make the unit not ever log out. This is also very helpful if you have a scenario where you have more of an open environment and you don't really care. Whoever logs in just stays logged in. This is very helpful when we talk about home automation because the auto logout will actually disconnect the recorder from your automation system. So please, if you are using an integration system, a home automation system, set your auto logout to 0. It'll save you a lot of hassle later on. In an analog environment, encoding is something that really helps things out. In an IP situation, it's vital to understand what encoding is and how it works. You'll notice two streams here, the main stream or regular stream on the left-hand side and the extra stream or the substream over here on the right-hand side. The main stream is what actually writes to your hard drive. So I'm recording here at 1080p resolution at 20 frames per second, and my bit rate on this particular camera is about 6 megs. That's pretty standard for a 3 megapixel camera, but I can certainly alter it as well. If I want to turn it down, I can certainly bring it down to 720p or heck even D1 resolution if I'm not looking to record at such a high rate. Frame rate is often misunderstood because folks don't understand exactly what a frame rate is. The frame rate is certainly the amount of images that are taken per second coming from that camera. What's real time? Real time is roughly 15 frames per second. Your television at home, you walking around, is about 15 frames per second. Keep in mind that we may want to bring it a little higher. When you go through a parking lot and the vehicle is moving at about 30 miles an hour, that's about 30 frames per second. When you're flying through the interstate and the toll cameras are catching you, they're catching you at about 60 frames per second. For most applications, 15 frames is plenty. So start there as a baseline. If you find that you're missing things or your image looks choppy, certainly bring your frame rate up or down, but it will definitely help you out in the long run by modifying your frame rate. This has a direct impact on your hard drive space. So just changing it a couple of frames will buy you an extra couple of days of record time. The bit rate is very flexible. This again is the bit rate on the local network. So if I'm working on a network that may be an older network with 10100 switches that maybe aren't gigabit or not as powerful, I may want to bring that down a little bit. Again, bit rate has a tremendous impact on my hard drive space. Maybe I have a small amount of hard drive and I want to get a little extra recording out of it. Just lowering the bandwidth or the bit rate will definitely make a difference. The substream or the extra stream is very helpful when we stream out. This is what you're seeing on your iPad or your iPhone when you're viewing your cameras remotely. For the most part, I'll take this resolution and set it to say D1 resolution, and I'll take the frame rate all the way down to say 7 frames per second. Keep in mind that most folks, when they're watching their cameras or their home on their application, they're not really in it for facial recognition. They want a strange vehicle in their driveway, or they're looking to see if the front door is wide open. These are things that you can certainly see at D1 7 frames per second. The impact on your bit rate is going to be tremendous. I can actually take my bit rate itself, lower it all the way down to almost 200. Say I have an ADSL or a DSL modem at the house. I can stream cameras out at this all day long with no impact at all on my bandwidth. So again, modifying your substream or your extra stream will have a humongous impact on your bandwidth as you're streaming out, because this is the setting that's used for your iPhone app, your iPad app, etc. Again, I'm recording at a high resolution. If I were to stream 1080p out on every single camera, I would definitely be taxing my network. The internet that I have at the location, as well as my 3G or 4G coming into my device. By lowering my extra stream, I now have the ability to manage that in a much, much easier fashion. Again, a lot of times folks will ask you, how much bandwidth do I need for this project? This will impact it dramatically. Remember, the mainstream is what's being written to the drive. That's what's impacting your local network. The substream or extra stream is what's going out. Another very cool feature of this is under the mainstream, I have different types of recording. So for example, if I'm doing motion recording, I can raise or lower those settings. If I'm doing alarm recording, I can certainly raise those settings. So say for example, I want to record normally all the time at 720p. However, when the alarm triggers, when someone opens the door in the middle of the night, it'll immediately jump up to 1080p resolution. That's a huge plus. The only time I'm utilizing the maximum hard drive space is when I really need it. So motion events or alarm events can certainly be at a much higher resolution than your traditional viewing. Our schedule is extremely flexible. In fact, we're yet to see a scenario where it doesn't work. If you do nothing else but turn the unit on, it's going to be recording all the time, 24/7, every camera, all the time. But a lot of people want to manipulate that. Maybe trigger it to only record when motion is detected, or maybe only record when an alarm state happens. This is a great example that a dealer had brought to us for a medical office. Essentially what he's doing on each camera per day, it's not an all or nothing scenario. You can manipulate it as much as you like. Overnight, it only records when the alarm is triggered. During the day, when there's patients and things going on in the office, it's recording all the time. When everyone takes their lunch break from 12 to 2, it only records motion. Maybe they forgot a patient and left him in one of the exam rooms. As he's out walking around the hallway looking for everyone, he'll trigger motion. When they come back from lunch, it's back to regular recording. At 6 o'clock, it goes back to alarm recording. This is a pretty amazing scheme. It's definitely only recording and only taking up hard drive space when it really needs it. Hopefully the alarm doesn't go off at night, and hopefully they don't leave anyone in the exam room, so it's only recording during the portion of the day that they actually want it. This is a pretty elaborate setup, but it really actually is only taking up 5 periods of the day. I have period 6 that I'm not even using. So really I could do something else during the day if I like to as well. That's flexible. Say for example, the doctor's going on vacation for a week. I can set my holiday settings so it'll override whatever the settings are here during a particular schedule. All I have to do is click on holiday setting. It'll bring up a calendar. I select what days I want to have it on vacation mode. I select what the vacation mode is going to be, and immediately during that period, it'll revert. As soon as his vacation's over and he comes back to the office, it'll automatically go back to the regular schedule without you having to modify any of the settings at all. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about networking. Networking is very important, obviously, if you want to view your cameras on either the local network or remotely. The first and most important part is getting a local IP address. Having a local IP address will allow your recorder to be viewed on the local network. There are several ways to do that. Probably the easiest way is right here. If I select DHCP, the recorder is going to request an address from the router. We mentioned earlier about working with the IT staff. That's the simplest way. If there's someone who manages a network, just ask them for an IP address that you want to use for the cameras. This will definitely make your life a lot easier. If you don't have that luxury, DHCP is the way to go. You select it once, you'll find all of your numbers will zero out. You reboot the recorder, it will draw new addresses from the DHCP server on the network. Keep in mind that once you've drawn a new address, you certainly want to uncheck DHCP. You don't want it to keep getting new addresses. The gateway is very important because this is the access that all of the devices on the inside of your network have to get out to the world. So the gateway is unique for your network, but it's the same on every device on your network. Everyone has the same gateway. This is an address on the inside of the router that's used to actually let the devices know where to go to get out to the internet. There are 3 ports primarily that we're concerned about when we're setting up our recorder for remote access. Those are the TCP port, the HTTP port, and the UDP port. These ports are basically ports on the router itself where traffic coming in from the outside will know where to be directed. We refer to that as port forwarding. Keep in mind there's another word that's often used by your ISP, and that's called port opening. Basically, they would take port 80 and just open it up to the inside. That's not what we want to accomplish here. What we want is port forwarding. If I'm a computer on the internet and I come to your outside address on port 80, I want to be directed directly to this local IP address so that I can see exactly the login for the recorder. So with port forwarding, we're going to use the HTTP port, which is primarily used by web interfaces. You can certainly use Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, or Safari to view our recorders remotely. The HTTP port is primarily used by our phone apps. Again, the ICRSS Pro, the ICView, and the IC720 app all use the TCP port. You'll also find our Smart ICRSS application, which is available for free in our download section and support, available for Windows or Mac. We'll also use the TCP port. UDP is primarily used on corporate networks. It's a very secure type of protocol. We do occasionally forward the UDP port as well. I like to forward it as a backdoor in case there's a problem with my TCP port. In corporate networks, they're almost always going to want you to use the UDP port. Occasionally, you may be asked to forward the RTSP port as well. Traditionally, this is 554, and this is used mostly by remote access by our engineers to do firmware updates or any type of updates on the network devices. Let's go into some advanced networking settings. Again, we're going to review this in a separate presentation. Of course, UPnP is available on all of our devices. If you have UPnP enabled on your router, it'll automatically assign addresses and forward your ports for you. Of course, all of our units have the ability to do NTP, which is National Time Protocol. This is used to synchronize the time. I strongly recommend it on your IP cameras. At every camera, synchronize it to the local college or even the national NTP server so that everything will have the same time, roughly. Of course, email notification is done here. We can set up email accounts, be it a Gmail account or a Yahoo account or even one of your own corporate accounts, to send notifications out in different applications. For example, a motion event happens in the middle of the night. It can send out a text message as well as an email to up to 3 recipients to show them exactly what's going on. Of course, FTP is designed around replicating your files out to another server. That FTP, or NAS as it's often referred to as, can send data to a server at a co-location somewhere or maybe back to your office, and that can be scheduled as well. Maybe when the alarm goes off, just start sending data to your FTP server. You'll often hear this referred to as cloud servicing as well. I see Realtime is in the middle of a negotiation with a major partner to provide cloud services, and that's basically the same thing. We can set a schedule so it'll automatically replicate your data to the cloud whenever you like it. Let's go into our detect settings. Detect settings are very important when you're talking about setting up your motion devices, for example. You want the recorder to only record on motion or maybe send notification on motion. This is a great example of where you would set it up. It is per channel, so I can set my settings independently based on which camera it is. My sensitivity is 1 to 6. A sensitivity of 1 is the least sensitive. Basically, something very large has to pass in front of that camera before it's going to detect motion. This is most likely used in hallway situations where the only thing you see is the door. When the door opens, sensitivity of 1 will certainly trigger. A sensitivity of 6, basically if a bug or a spider walks in front of the screen, it's going to trigger. So normally we set it somewhere around 3, which is a nice in between. And this will give you the ability to, again, have a good sensitivity that you can adjust up or down based on how much you're actually picking up. I strongly recommend, if you are going to be using sensitivity and motion recording, let it record for a week or so and then come back and see. Is it picking up a lot of strange things? Is it picking up a lot of motion that it shouldn't be picking up? Is it missing things? Then adjust your sensitivity accordingly. Another very cool feature is this region. I'm going to go to channel 2 here, and I'm going to select my region. And you'll notice as soon as I selected this region, I'm able to see kind of a pink hue. This means that it's detecting motion in this entire room. Say I block out some of this area. Let's go ahead and click on some sections, like say for example here and here. And let's go ahead and click on these right here. So with a motion like this, essentially what's going to happen is if any motion happens in this area, it's going to detect it. Any motion happens in this area, it's not going to see it. So this walkway, for example, if someone were to walk up this hallway, I would definitely detect motion. Any other case, absolutely not. So this is very important if I have an area with, say, a lot of trees or a lot of shrubs, or maybe I have a body of water like a river or a swimming pool, or maybe even a highway off in the distance. Every time a truck drives by, I certainly don't want it to read as motion. So I can cover that area just by making it clear and only show the area where there's motion at. Let's go ahead and set it back up and right-click out of it. And that's the region setting. Now there are 2 other event types that I can utilize with this. Those are video loss and camera masking. So say for example someone throws a ball cap over my camera or spray paints the lens. The recorder is smart enough to know it's still working, but I don't see anything. So that type of event could certainly trigger certain other types of notifications. Video loss is another great one. Someone cuts your wire. Well, the recorder is smart enough to know there used to be a camera there and now all of a sudden it isn't. So it can do notification based on that video loss. What types of notification are available? Well, let's take a look. You have a period, which is a schedule. We only want to get notified when motion events happens after hours. I certainly don't want to get a text every time somebody walks in my building. I can certainly set my schedule. I can tie it into alarm contacts. So if I'm using an alarm output, which most of our recorders have through the Phoenix connector, I can certainly trigger it from here. I can show a message. Say, for example, this unit is sitting in a guard shack somewhere. As soon as motion is detected or video loss happens, it will go to a full screen view and give them a message to let them know, hey, be alert, something's happening on the screen. I can upload alarms. If I'm using a central station like video verification, it could do notification on that. Of course, email. I can change my record channel if I like to. I can activate a PTZ. For example, I've got a fixed camera on the inside of the location looking at a door. When that door detects motion after hours, the PTZ that's out here touring the perimeter can immediately zoom into the outside of that door. It has a preset to automatically go to there. Or maybe start a scan of the parking lot to see if there are any vehicles out there. I can activate that just off a motion event on a fixed camera. Very, very cool. Of course, I can activate particular tours if I like to. If I have another PTZ, I can go right to the tour level. Of course, snapshots are very handy. I can take a series of still pictures when some motion is detected. Again, when I'm getting text messages, that's very handy. I can see that the door is open. I can see the person coming inside. That really helps things out. Last but not least, of course, is a buzzer. There is a piezo built into all of our recorders. It sounds like a cat being strangled. If this unit's in a guard shack, they will definitely wake up the guard and let them know that there's a problem going on. So activating the buzzer will certainly give them that feature. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the advanced features. The one in particular that I really want to talk about is account. Again, the default accounts that come with the unit are the guest account, the admin, and the user account. You'll notice that in our systems there are groups and there are users within the groups. If you're a Windows guy like me, you understand Active Directory, it's the same thing. A group has a certain amount of permissions, and any user that I add to that group is going to inherit whatever permissions that group has. So for example, I have groups called admins and users. That's the default. If I want to add another group called managers or hostesses or staff or medical or something like that, I can create multiple groups, an unlimited amount of groups, and within that group I add my users. So here with an admin, they can do just about anything and everything. A user can basically just view cameras and do playback. So think about your homeowner. Maybe you have a homeowner who likes to tinker. Go ahead and create an account for him and make him a user. That way he can't do any damage to the recorder. When he logs into it, he's not going to see any of these menu items. It really will make your life a lot easier in the long run. As I add users, the first thing it's going to do is ask me for the username. Of course, I would type it in like I did my username, my password, and I confirm the password. Obviously, you want to make sure these two match. You'll notice this field up above that says reusable. Reusable can be very helpful at times. Keep in mind, if you've got a user who logs in from multiple locations, they can be reusable. I log in from my office and then I log in from home, I'm reusable. Maybe I've got staff that I don't want to be reusable. Maybe I've got a receptionist that I only want to be able to log in from one station. If she tries to log in somewhere else, it says, hey, you're already logged in, you can't log in twice. So that's that reusable. A helpful hint is if you are using the iPhone app or the Android app, make sure the account that you're using is reusable. A little tool that it's built into it, which is kind of helpful, is when it logs into a recorder for the first time and you open a camera, it's going to automatically log in for a second time into the second camera, just to kind of speed things along. A lot of times you may open the application and open your camera, and almost immediately you'll get a notification that says you're already logged in. Well, that just means that user is not reusable. So this is a really helpful point to you when you're adding user accounts. If it is someone who's going to be remotely accessing through ICRSS Pro or ICView or even the IC720 app, make sure they're reusable. Again, as I add the group, I have an admin, a user, heck, I even have a Pat group. What Pat have the ability to do? He can do quite a bit of everything. You'll notice that as I add members to groups, I can take away permissions, but I can't add more permissions than that group is capable of doing. So for example, you'll see members of the Pat group cannot see channel 1. That's a covert camera or maybe a nanny cam. I cannot see that camera when I log in because the group cannot see that camera. I can certainly take more away, but I can't add more than the group is capable of. So that's a very helpful point. Again, if I make the person a user account, you'll see All they can do is view and do replay. That's it. They can't go into any other features or any other functions of the recorder. The auto maintenance. Out of the box, your unit is designed to reboot every Tuesday at 2 a.m. That's kind of odd. Why do we do that? Keep in mind that all of the configurations and all of the work that you're doing on your recorder, your playbacks, are actually done at the board level. All of our configurations stay on the board. The only thing that writes to your hard drive is actual video recording. So that fills the buffer up pretty quickly. And we like to say that once a week or so, you reboot your recorder. It just clears that buffer. It doesn't delete anything or format anything, but it does start the recorder out fresh. In fact, a lot of times if you call up and say to our help desk, my recording is running slow, or everything seems kind of bogged down, they'll ask you, go ahead and reboot the recorder, because that really does make a big difference. A lot of opportunity comes when you reboot it to have it clear that buffer and again start from scratch. How often you reboot it is really based on how often the client is using the recorder. If you're using it all the time, you're constantly doing playback, once a week should be fine. Our demo recorders reboot every morning. I can set it to every single day. At a certain time, the units will reboot. I can also set it to never. So if I have a client who hardly ever does playback, it really isn't that big a deal, they're not getting any kind of problems with resources, they never reboot it, it's fine. A lot of times in corporate environments where I have all of my recorders in a data center or a server room, when the local IT staff are doing their monthly maintenance, they're rebooting all of their file servers, just ask them to reboot your recorder at that time too, and that way you start fresh. So keep in mind that the auto maintenance is set for every Tuesday at 2 a.m. You can certainly manipulate that. You can change that as you like. It will definitely impact. A lot of times we'll hear from end users who, that first Wednesday morning, the end user will call them and say, wow, this thing's been beeping all night. Well, when it reboots, it does beep when it posts, but only once. So keep in mind that if you don't want it to happen in the middle of the night, change it to the middle of the day, or change it to the weekend, or change it to a different time, or set it to never, and just whenever you're around or whenever quarterly, have the end user just reboot their recorder. So that's our menu. Keep an eye out for a new series talking about playback as well as advanced networking. Again, I'm Patrick Carter, the training manager here at IC Realtime. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.